Friday night 2016. I was 8 at the time, when my brother, who was 10, and I were home alone. We stayed in our bedroom to play on our PS2. My brother went downstairs to make some meals for us to eat, while I was waiting. I needed to go to the bathroom so badly, so I went. Once I came back to play on my PS2, I saw my brother looking confused. I asked him, "What's wrong?" He replied, "Did you open the window?" I thought he was joking, so I laughed and said, "No, are you trying to scare me?" Then he didn't answer. I didn't mind, he sometimes ignores me. I went back to play on my PS2 when I heard a loud banging on the window. I couldn't see who it was since it was dark outside. I went outside with my brother and a flashlight. When we saw who it was a big tall white man with really blonde hair and a black hoodie. I quickly ran into the house, went to my kitchen to grab a knife, and ran with my brother to the bathroom. While I was in the bathroom, I realized I left the door open. I cried in fear with my brother. We called 911. Then, when the cops arrived, they found the man dead. Days passed and I wondered if he wanted us to see him kill himself or worse. Me and my friends were having an awesome New Year's Eve party. I started speaking to a girl called Krista when things started getting a bit weird. We were alone in a room and she started speaking about New Year's resolutions. She looked me in the eye and asked, "Do you know where the dark goes when the light comes on? Do you know where the light goes in the dark?" I never heard these questions before and just smiled at her and said, "I guess it disappears. I don't know." Then she said to me, "What if it was still here?" I asked her, "What do you mean? What if what was still here?" "The light," she said. "What if the light was still here when it was dark? And where would the light go in the dark?" She kept talking about dark and light, so I stood up and walked out of the room and said, "Nice to meet you, Krista. Let's go outside. It's nearly midnight. We don't want to miss the fireworks." I walked out to a group of my friends, excited, waiting for the fireworks. Krista came up to me again. She looked very serious and said in a serious tone, "You won't like it when you find out the answer." I asked her, "What do you mean?" She turned around and walked away. 5 minutes later, my friends lit the fireworks and everyone cheered until suddenly everything changed when a firework backfired into my stomach. I looked down and could see the fire burning in my stomach as I was screaming in pain. A few days later, when I was recovering in the hospital, a nurse walked into the room. When I saw who it was, I froze. It was Krista. She looked down at me and said, "I told you that you wouldn't like where the light goes when it's dark." My cousin would always tell us a creepy story that happened to him when he was 9. Monday 2009, my cousin, let's call him Jason, a smart 9-year-old who would play on his PS2 every day when he comes from school. On Monday 2009, he received an iPhone. The next day, he took it to school to show it off to his classmates. One day, while he was texting one of his friends, he received a message from an unknown number. The text was 666, and it had a really creepy image of what looked like a demon. He thought it was some troll messing with him, so he ignored it. But the next day at night, he received the same message and picture. He was freaked out. A few minutes later, the same unknown number called him. All he could hear was someone whispering an address. My cousin blocked the unknown number. A month later, he saw on the news a boy who was brutally murdered in the same address the unknown number was talking about. He thanked God for giving him a bad feeling and not going to that weird address, because if he went, he'd become dead like the dead boy. We are all chasing for more freedom, and I mean every living being, big or small, is constantly looking to escape. Humanity has come a long way with the amount of freedom and rights that people have. A couple of years ago, slavery was the norm, and people were divided by the colour of their skin. Gender equality has come a long way as well, because it wasn't so long ago that women were restricted to being only mothers. So many famous male and female activists have fought for freedom for all human beings and are now being looked up to as heroes. Anything can be a prison though, and it could be a job you hate or being stuck in a relationship that is going nowhere. The need to be free from those types of prisons are just as strong as any other yearning for escape. Something always comes to trap us, and the fight to escape entrapments, however big or small, is the curse for being alive. People addicted to drugs used drugs to help them escape from one hellish lifestyle, only to be reliant on their drug to the point that it becomes their new prison. They traded in one prison for another. The way addicts escape addiction is through rehab and the use of other medicines as their ticket to freedom. The need to get out of things is in all of us, but with so many rights protecting us and the freedom to love, travel and choose whatever takes our fancy, I must ask the question as to why people are so miserable, considering everything that we have and the privileges our era has given us. Unlike in past eras, we sappy group of people living in the best of times, depression is prevalent throughout the globe, and suicide is common, even though anyone from the past would think we are living in the golden age of human civilization. I always used to think that maybe we are all ungrateful, but then opinions always change, like the seasons throughout the year. My daughter was looking for freedom, and she has always been depressed. Ever since she was a little tiny girl, she hated hanging around with other kids and was a very reserved child. The other girls naturally took to picking on her because my daughter was so different, and it was obvious that the kids her age would not take to her so easily. I have had to change her school multiple times now. Now I have found a school where she can be herself. It's strange how children bully each other, as if they do not realise that what they say and do to each other has real effects on the other human. I guess maturing takes time. I tried to show my daughter the different types of hobbies she could get into, but she just doesn't seem to like anything, and everything just depresses her. I have spent quite a bit of money trying to get the best psychologist to deal with my daughter, but in the end, medication is all that we are given. I dreamt that one day my daughter would play with other girls and enjoy all of the things that life has given us. Then one day I awoke to my daughter laughing and chatting to someone outside our house, and as I looked outside, I couldn't believe that my daughter was socializing with someone. It was a woman I had never seen before, but my daughter seemed to connect with her somehow, and I was just so happy for her. When I tried to introduce myself to the woman talking with my daughter, she just simply walked away. My daughter had a smile on her face, like she felt relieved, and I asked her about the woman she was talking to, but my daughter just smiled and said, "Just a generous woman." Just like that, I started seeing my daughter hanging about with this woman. I didn't try and intervene, because for the first time my daughter looked so comfortable in her own skin. At the same time, an adult woman hanging around my daughter of high school age did always concern me. My daughter was smiling though, and I guess I had intentions of inviting this woman over to my house to try to get to know her. I mean, I have tried many specialists to get through to my daughter, and I wanted to know how she did it. My wife was a little jealous and felt like she was a failure because she couldn't connect with her daughter. When my daughter went to school, she didn't want a lift. I received a knock on the door. There were two smartly dressed guys who were from the British Secret Services, and they had something serious to tell me. They showed pictures of the woman who my daughter had taken a liking to, and told me that this woman had died in World War II. They showed us her documents and everything about her life and where she was buried, and the obvious questions were asked, but the answers were not simple to understand. "It's not the dead or anything supernatural," the first guy told me. "Do you believe in aliens?" the other one asked. "Aliens?" I replied. "We are not so sure how they came to our planet, but these aliens travel and feed off freedom. Our race is freer than ever before, and so these aliens can travel and feed so more than they could before," the first guy told me. "They use dead people as well to move around, as dead people are considered by them to be free," the second guy told me. I couldn't believe any of this, and I told them to go away, even when they showed me proof that they did truly work in the National Secret Service. I couldn't take any more of it. They gave me their card, and I was told to call them if anything started to escalate. As soon as my daughter came home, I banned her from ever seeing that strange woman ever again. My daughter started to cry and moan that it wasn't fair and that she really liked the woman. When I followed her into her bedroom crying and wailing, we were both in shock when that strange woman was suddenly in her room. My daughter screamed in terror, and I was just trying to catch my breath out of sheer shock that the woman who my daughter knew now looked like a hideous creature. The woman held out her arm towards my daughter, and even though she was talking softly, it echoed throughout the house. Do you want to be free from all of this, Julia? Come with us, and we will give you the ultimate freedom, the woman told my daughter. I then noticed that my daughter seemed to be in some kind of trance. Her smile was weak, and I grabbed hold of her to stop her from moving into the creature's arms. All my daughter could say was, "I want to be free from all of this and everything else." Then, by some miracle, the two guys from the Secret Services had been keeping an eye on our family, and they rushed into my house. As they entered the room, all three of us dragged my daughter from her bedroom. I locked my daughter's bedroom, with the thing still trapped inside. As I did this, my daughter was in the living room. She was back to being shocked and scared. I finally believed the two Secret Service guys, and they explained more to me about the odd aliens from outer space. They said to me, "These aliens don't just travel and feed off freedom, but they are made of it." This also answered my question as to why depression and suicide is so prevalent in the golden era of having such high levels of freedom and rights. Depression is just one of the effects caused by the aliens who chase after freedom and make us kill ourselves, because they cause so much emotional and psychological pain that their victim only wants to be free from it all. I wanted to take my daughter to the hospital, but the two Secret Service guys told me that the hospital wouldn't help. They warned me that there is only one thing that I could do. They told me that because the aliens feed off freedom and can't travel through freedom, I had to start reducing my daughter's freedoms. They explained that even some of her rights as a human being would have to be limited. That way, it would be hard for the aliens to get to her. The two Secret Service guys spoke to their manager. As they explained this to me, they started to shuffle some paperwork and explain to me that my daughter had to start doing hard labor for no money. She would be prevented from going out or eating something when she felt like it. I went along with it because all I wanted was for my daughter to be safe. My wife was utterly distraught about the whole thing, and she couldn't stop thinking about my daughter's future. She was concerned about what my daughter could do if her rights and freedoms are limited. We were told that some people do survive, but some don't. We were warned that the aliens are always trying to find ways to get to their victim. I had to take my daughter out of school and make her sleep down in the cellar and lock the cellar door. All of this made it look like our daughter was a slave. However, it did work, as the woman in her bedroom had disappeared. I would sometimes see the woman either in the market or some other place outside the home. Either way, she was far away from my family. At a later date, I had to force my daughter to go to work in a meat factory, where the owner was working for the Secret Services. The department in charge of the meat factory is a special secret government service department which deals with aliens and other creatures alike. The department have made all sorts of factories as a way of rehabilitation for people like my daughter whose freedom and rights had to be taken away due to the aliens. It was horrible, and listening to her cry, it also wasn't nice to smell her after a hard day's work. My daughter begged me to give her life back, but I couldn't, as I knew what would happen to her if I did. All of my daughter's basic rights and freedom now taken away, but she was safe for a while, which only lasted for a couple of months. One day I heard my daughter screaming down in the cellar. As I rushed down, I saw that my daughter was in front of that woman again, and she was trying to tempt my daughter into taking freedom. I saw my daughter going back into a trance again, and her smile was so weak and feeble I felt like she was drugged or something. I ran down the stairs and dragged my daughter away from the alien. As I did, it gave out a screech, and a couple of more Secret Service guys came to our rescue. Our house was being watched 24/7 at that point, and I locked the cellar door. After the door was locked, I looked in confusion at the two men who ordered me to take away my daughter's freedom and rights. I was confused because their plan hadn't worked as they'd promised. Then one of them looked at me with a serious, worried look and said, "We have to go deeper and take more rights from your daughter. This time we will take her ability to choose who she can have sex with." I practically puked when I heard that, and I shouted, "You want to take away the freedom of choice of who my daughter gets to have sex with? She is still at school." "We may not have a choice here, and the alien still managed to get to your daughter because she still had some freedom left, which was sexual freedom. I didn't think we would have to go that far, but this creature is determined to get to your daughter," the second Secret Service man told me. Although it sounded disgusting, they had a point. However, I wasn't going to let my daughter become some sex slave, and nor was my wife prepared to see our daughter become a sex slave. Both my wife and I decided to give our daughter away to the creature down in the cellar. As I held my daughter in my arms with my wife behind me crying her eyes out, I looked at the alien, and it looked at my daughter. My daughter smiled again. I loved seeing her smile like that. I realized then that I couldn't bear seeing her as some slave anymore. My daughter said to the alien, "I want freedom. I want to escape." And the alien touched my daughter, and she died in my arms. The alien looked at me and said, "Your daughter is now free from everything that has caused her so much agony." The next couple of years were hard. The relationship between my wife and me was not the same anymore, as we would both constantly argue and blame each other. It was not until recently we both saw our daughter again. We would see her in random places, which brought hope to us both. And one day she appeared in our house, and my wife and I were overjoyed. Our daughter was now offering me and my wife freedom. She is offering us freedom from the pain that life can give to parents whose child has died. Both of us know what we want. My wife was the willing participant, and now I have to try and to protect her from the same fate my daughter had experienced. Mike was a host of a very popular nighttime chat show called The Nightline. He had a lot of controversial topics discussed and strange callers. But one night in November, he had the most controversial call ever, which he could have never guessed before taking it, that it would change his whole life. He was chatting about marriages and couples divorcing, etc. One caller who called himself Kevin rang just a few minutes before the show was about to end and was speaking about his wife arguing with him over and over, and he asked Mike for advice on what he should do. Mike was put on the spot, especially as it was so near the end of the show, but he decided to go with telling the caller to go with his instincts. Mike meant if he felt like getting separated or divorced, then go with his instincts. But as soon as Mike said it, a few seconds later, there was a loud sound of a gunshot in the distance. A few seconds later, there were police sirens. A gunshot in this city at night would cause a scene, so he knew it was definitely a gunshot after he heard the sirens. The thought crossed his mind, could it be Kevin the caller shot his wife when he had told him to trust his instincts? Was he some sort of lunatic who took his words for gospel and trusted his instincts even though it was to kill his wife in cold blood? He hoped that wasn't the case. A few minutes later, Mike exited the building, and there was a man that seemed to be soaked standing outside, as if he was waiting for someone. The man asked Mike for a light. Mike took out his light and offered it to the man, but the man said, "Could you light it, please? I've a problem at the moment with my arm." Mike said, "Sure," and lit the man's cigarette. Suddenly Mike jumped back as the man burst into flames and said, "My name is Kevin." He looked into Mike's eyes as he was burning to death right in front of him. Mike was stunned, shocked, knowing that it had to be Kevin, the caller who had just called him a few minutes ago. Within seconds, a police siren was heard, and they pulled up to Mike and the burning man. A cop jumped out and held the gun at Mike and shouted, "Stop! You're under arrest. Put your hands in the air where I can see them. You have the right to remain silent." The cop's voice was tuned out after that, as Mike was in a daze, knowing he was being arrested for the man's murder, and blamed himself for the man murdering his wife. An ordinary day with my friends hanging out, riding bikes around the block and far away from home. Something caught our attention. An abandoned house. Completely abandoned and damaged. What caught my attention was the really bad smell that the house has. I planned with my friends to visit the house at midnight to finally find out what's the bad smell. It was finally midnight. I had already packed my supplies needed for this mission. I had a notebook so I can write notes based on what we see. When we arrived to the house had the door open. I thought it was weird, considering the fact that it was shut when we were riding the bikes around the house. Once we entered, the smell got worse. It came from the kitchen. I had a pocket knife for self-protection. We went to the kitchen, and our eyes opened wide when we realized there was a cannibalistic restaurant. I hid in the closet with my friends. I started to write notes about it. Once the people in that restaurant were gone, we took off. We called the police once we got home. They arrived a little bit late, yet they found a dead body outside our house, with a note that said, and a picture of us taking off.